It's a day that ends in the letter Y. It is another scandal day engulfing Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. But it's also an embarrassment, not only for the nation that the military serves, but for the men and women in it, and for its commander-in-chief, frankly. Donald Trump, when it calls into question just how much more embarrassment Donald Trump is going to tolerate from his hand-picked, bipartisanly opposed Secretary of Defense.
I served in the Marine Corps. We are trained to be war fighters, not for crowd control. You're an embarrassment to this country. You're unfit to lead. And there's been bipartisan members of Congress that have called for your resignation. You should just get the hell out and let somebody competently lead this department.
He served in the United States Marine Corps. That was the opening volley from Representative Salud Carbajal as he locked eyes with Pete Hegseth. It was not a boast. It was not political posturing. It was a tactical foundation. Without it, the ensuing dismantling might have been brushed aside as standard partisan theater. Instead, a man forged in the crucible of active duty was staring down the civilian entrusted with commanding every Marine on Earth. The juxtaposition was truly devastating. One man earned his unyielding authority navigating live fire. The other secured his position broadcasting manufactured outrage on television. Let me be perfectly clear, you are not an army of one, and you are certainly not an army of woke. You are an American army, an army of warriors. Hegseth sat frozen in the chair. The televised provocateur who built a lucrative career branding generals as weak and politicians as spineless was visibly shrinking by the second. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted irreversibly. This was no longer a standard congressional hearing. It was a brutal, live-action autopsy of a paper-thin resume exposed to real scrutiny. Carbajal never raised his voice. He did not have to. The quiet gravity of a genuine combat veteran resonated through the room, making it painfully obvious he was not addressing an equal. He was addressing a dangerous liability who somehow gained access to the nation's nuclear codes and the Pentagon. Hegseth offered nothing. No command presence, no gravitas, only the hollow silence of a televised tough guy realizing his fabricated bravado crumbles instantly against actual combat experience. And the revelations that followed were exponentially worse. These were chilling details that leave shocked observers questioning how he ever entered the Pentagon at all.
I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It shouldn't come as no surprise that I have serious concerns with both the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines to Los Angeles. I served in the Marine Corps. We are trained to be war fighters, not for crowd control. Everyone here should be alarmed that the president has sent armed forces into a city against the wishes of a governor and mayor. I am concerned this administration is purposely escalating the situation with this step and politicizing our armed forces in the process. Let's call it for what it is. It's political theater. Hegseth, are the Marines in Los Angeles ordered to protect property by any means necessary?
Sir, I would say the ICE officers and police officers being attacked is not political theater. The National Guard and Marines,
just yes or no. Just yes or no.
The National Guard and Marines have the full authority to protect federal ICE agents.
Yes or no. Can you just say yes or no? This isn't Fox anymore. Just yes or no.
They're there to protect federal agents and federal.
Another BS answer.
This is the devastating consequence of handing Earth's most formidable military to a man who still believes complex crises can be resolved with a cable news monologue. 700 Marines and thousands of National Guardsmen were suddenly deployed into Los Angeles, completely defying the explicit objections of both the governor and the mayor. The city was not under siege. Rather, the White House cynically calculated that parading armed forces through civilian streets would thrill their domestic political base. Lethal warfighters expressly trained to close with and annihilate the enemy were reduced to standing as intimidating props outside federal buildings. The stunt squandered well over $134 million. Thousands of soldiers were sidelined from crucial missions right as California entered peak wildfire season, its own guard paralyzed by partisan theater. Meanwhile, the architect of this spectacle, who famously mocked generals for being woke, could not articulate a clear yes or no regarding what those deployed Marines were actually authorized to do. He deflected. He pivoted into a familiar Fox-style tirade about defending ICE. The former television host who monetized a tough guy persona looked utterly lost reciting borrowed talking points. You could watch him realize in real time that the teleprompter was missing and the applause had permanently stopped. Once the political optics evaporated, the Pentagon quietly ordered the troops home. And tragically, this failure was only the very beginning of the institutional damage.
Under the SRUF, the use of force, are Marines allowed to fire warning shots?
No.
Now that's more like it. Isn't that easy? Well, I'm going to beat this drum because you refuse to take responsibility. Will you take responsibility for having made a mistake, not to mention many people would say break the law, in participating in the Signal group chat that included a journalist, your wife, your brother, where classified information was shared?
Sir, every way I communicate is authorized. Every way I communicate.
Okay, if you want to say that. I have called for your resignation. I didn't think you were qualified before your confirmation, and you have done nothing to inspire confidence in your ability to lead competently. You broke the law in sharing classified information, and in doing so, endangered the lives of our service members that you are responsible for. Your inability to hold yourself accountable makes you incapable to lead. This alone makes you unfit to be the Secretary of Defense.
You are fundamentally unfit to be the Secretary of Defense. This is the catastrophic reality Carbajal is referencing, and it is infinitely worse than publicly understood. This crisis involves not one, but two compromised signal chats. The first scandal erupted in March, revealing Hegseth carelessly broadcast real-time operational details for an impending strike on Houthi targets in Yemen. Exact fighter jet launch times and drone deployments. Everything was leaked into a group chat inadvertently containing an Atlantic journalist. Bipartisan national security experts immediately condemned this intelligence as inherently classified. Weeks later, a second staggering breach surfaced. Hegseth had again transmitted highly sensitive operational specifics regarding the identical strike, this time directly to his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney. The devastation did not stop there. By December, the Pentagon's own independent inspector general released a damning final verdict. Hegseth's reckless communications blatantly violated Defense Department protocols and definitively placed American troops in extreme danger.
Brings us to today, almost a full circle moment for Pete Hegseth and the Trump White House. The initial massive scandal, which embarrassed the country and Donald Trump and his national security team, Signalgate. It was a massive national security breach. It was made possible entirely by the sloppy and haphazard nature of Donald Trump's national security team when they shared national security information, including war plans. And then former National Security Advisor Michael Waltz accidentally added Jeffrey Goldberg, a journalist from The Atlantic, to that group chat on Signal. A damning new report is being released from the Pentagon's Inspector General. That is the top watchdog at the building that Hegseth is in charge of running. That report says that Pete Hegseth shared information in that Signal chat, information that put mission operations and servicemen and women at risk about a pending military operation in Yemen that took place in March of this year. The Defense Department's Inspector General finds that while the mission ultimately was not jeopardized, Pete Hegseth violated his department's own policies when he used Signal, a commercial messaging app that is not approved for sharing classified information.
One United States Armed Services Committee senator characterized the horrifying breach perfectly. It practically handed the enemy the exact time and coordinates to target American aircraft during a live combat operation. Consequently, bipartisan senators adamantly insist Hegseth should never have secured his initial confirmation. Furthermore, investigators from his own administration's watchdog confirmed he cowardly dodged an official interview throughout their probe. Therefore, when Representative Carbajal boldly declares, "You broke the law," it is absolutely no theatrical exaggeration. He is explicitly weaponizing an active, ongoing federal criminal investigation against a sitting Secretary of Defense. Hegseth defensively muttering, "Every way I communicate is authorized," offers zero valid legal defense. It is simply a damning confession disguised as a pathetic shrug, a former weekend cable host famous for loudly condemning soft generals, carelessly jeopardized American pilots' lives because he preferred firing off texts on his personal phone like an immature teenager coordinating a college party. The same aggressive broadcaster demanding relentless toughness from military leaders instantly crumbled into empty, hollow swagger when confronted with genuine accountability. Now arrives the devastating juncture of the hearing, where the confrontation turns sharply personal, and Hegseth finally faces the exact unforgiving question every single American citizen absolutely deserves a truthful answer to.
Secretary, do you think the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, a nation that is hostile towards the United States?
Well, as you know, sir, President Trump is committed to peace.
No, I just want yes or no answers. Today,
the United States has spent billions of dollars.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Over years.
Just yes or no. Can I get a yes or no out of you?
We continue to send.
Come on.
Presidential drawdown.
It's that easy. Kindergartners could give me a yes or no. Yes or no.
Yes, we support peace in Ukraine.
Come on. Is this really leadership? You're an embarrassment to the United States. If Russia invades NATO allies, are you going to recommend to the president that we fulfill our Article 5 obligations?
Well, Russia has not invaded NATO allies.
No.
President Trump.
No. I reclaim my time. Yes or no? It's that simple.
There's Article 5 in NATO, which we recognize.
So is the answer yes or no?
That's what Article 5 is, yes.
Good. I'm glad you brought yourself to saying yes. Do you think political allegiance to Trump is a requirement for serving our nation, either in uniform or a civilian in the department?
I'm incredibly proud, as are millions of Americans.
No. Not today, Hegseth. Yes or no?
Congressman, you know what a silly question that is.
But silly enough to warrant a very straightforward answer. Yes or no?
We all support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
You know what? I'm not going to waste my time anymore. You're not worthy of my attention or my questions. You're an embarrassment to this country. You're unfit to lead. And there's been bipartisan members of Congress that have called for your resignation. You should just get the hell out and let somebody competently lead this department.
Mr. Chairman, do we not have any decorum in here?
Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. And I would urge everybody to remember and maintain a decorum suitable for this chamber with their further comments.
This hearing did not merely expose the glaring shortcomings of one man. It laid bare a profound systemic fracture within the American framework of civilian military control. This is a catastrophic rupture that no single resignation letter or meticulously sanitized press release can possibly heal. What the nation witnessed that afternoon was the grim, entirely predictable consequence of treating the United States Department of Defense like a syndicated television franchise. When the individual appointed to direct the largest, most lethal organization on the planet is selected for on-camera charisma rather than profound institutional depth, the fallout is devastating. The consequences refuse to remain neatly confined to a single awkward congressional exchange. Instead, they ripple outward, infecting every subsequent decision, every tactical order issued, and every human life placed in the line of fire. The American Armed Forces are not a content creation studio. The Pentagon is not a stage where fabricated branding can magically substitute for sound, strategic judgment. It is a vital institution fundamentally built on the sacred assumption that those perched at the apex of command comprehend the crushing weight of their authority. Tragically, that foundational assumption has been steadily, ruthlessly eroded. The hearing broadcast this institutional decay in real time. A civilian leader completely incapable of answering elementary questions regarding the boundaries of his own constitutional power is not merely unsuited for the role. He is an active, breathing hazard to the warfighters tasked with executing his directives. Consider the chilling message this broadcasts to the men and women currently in uniform. Every commanding officer who has diligently drafted an evaluation, every non-commissioned officer who has ruthlessly enforced tactical standards, and every junior enlisted soldier penalized for a missed formation or an improperly cleaned rifle now watches. The Secretary of Defense treats basic accountability as a trivial option. This double standard is not subtle, it is blinding. Furthermore, institutions that normalize such blatant hypocrisy inevitably forfeit the moral authority required to enforce any standards whatsoever. Our allies are actively scrutinizing this exact footage. Strategic partners who have invested decades forging ironclad trust with the United States now behold a defense chief who treats solemn treaty commitments as fodder for careless improvisation rather than binding obligations. Our adversaries are watching just as closely. They no longer need to manufacture anti-American propaganda when the sitting Secretary of Defense willingly supplies the material on live television. A military commanded by an individual who is visibly more comfortable acting tough than actually exercising disciplined strength is a military that practically begs to be tested by foreign powers. History is littered with the ruins of great empires that signaled internal chaos regarding their own strategic red lines. This damage is not theoretical. It crashes down on real human beings. It crashes down on the families who bravely send their sons and daughters into active duty, clinging to the desperate belief that the civilians in command know the difference between a cable news photo opportunity and a lethal combat deployment. It crashes down on junior officers forced to somehow translate vague, politically motivated rants into precise, executable operational orders. It lands squarely on the shoulders of career professionals who dedicated decades to mastering their tactical craft, only to watch a former weekend television host casually dismiss their lifetime of expertise with an arrogant shrug and a rehearsed talking point. There is a profound reason the armed forces have historically been shielded from the toxic daily churn of partisan media cycles. That vital insulation exists exclusively to protect the integrity of the institution from the exact brand of political theater that contaminated that hearing room. Once that protective barrier is breached, once the Pentagon operates on the identical perverse incentives that fuel cable news, prioritizing speed over precision, branding over substance, and blind loyalty over basic competence, the institution itself fundamentally transforms. This transformation is rarely a dramatic overnight collapse. It is insidious and incremental. It is a lowered standard over here, an unchallenged evasion over there, and the quiet, cowardly acceptance that certain individuals are simply too valuable to a partisan project to be bound by the rules governing everyone else. Over time, these toxic increments compound. The ultimate result is a hollowed-out organization that projects power on paper, but has entirely surrendered the internal discipline required to make that power lethal and effective. That is the terrifying trajectory we are currently on. The hearing did not initiate this trajectory. It merely illuminated it under the harsh glare of studio lights and rolling cameras. Unsurprisingly, the response from the entrenched political establishment has been entirely predictable. We hear endless calls for polite decorum, pathetic requests to lower the political temperature, and gentle reminders to remain respectful. These are the desperate sounds of a broken system that prioritizes the fragile illusion of order, far above the absolute necessity of accountability. Decorum has its place, but it is never more important than the truth. And when the undeniable truth is that the civilian commander of the American military cannot demonstrate even a baseline comprehension of his office's sacred responsibilities, demanding decorum is effectively demanding silence. In this dire context, silence is absolute complicity. The men and women who actually bleed for this country do not possess the luxury of silence. They operate under unforgiving rules that do not bend for a charismatic television background or political utility. They are rigorously evaluated, swiftly corrected, and mercilessly removed for failures infinitely smaller than the catastrophic incompetence displayed in that hearing room. The staggering chasm between the flawless standards demanded of our troops and the non-existent standards applied to the man at the top is now a matter of public record. That devastating knowledge cannot be unlearned. It will poison recruitment. It will cripple retention. It will heavily influence the quiet, agonizing calculations career officers make when deciding if this compromised institution still deserves their ultimate sacrifice. Furthermore, a massive constitutional principle is currently at stake. Civilian control of the military is never a blank check issued to any random civilian. It is a sacred system built on mutual, unyielding obligation. The military submits to civilian oversight solely because those civilians are constitutionally expected to exercise that immense power with extreme competence, strategic restraint, and absolute fidelity to the rule of law. When the civilian half of this critical bargain fails, the entire democratic arrangement fractures. The hearing made this fracture undeniable. It exposed a civilian leader who believes his only true accountability is pleasing a single elected official, rather than honoring the broader constitutional framework of law, congressional oversight, and institutional duty. That is not civilian control as the Founding Fathers envisioned it. It is something significantly thinner, weaker, and far more dangerous. The path to recovery is not overly complicated, though it will be brutally difficult to execute. The Department of Defense desperately requires leadership that treats the military as something infinitely larger than one administration's fleeting public relations strategy. The Pentagon needs individuals who understand that the unwavering trust of the armed forces is never automatically granted by a fancy title. It is forged through the consistent, grueling demonstration of exceptional judgment under immense pressure. We need leaders who can actually answer straightforward yes or no questions without acting as though a demand for baseline clarity is a personal attack. We need leaders who possess the moral clarity to recognize that the millions of lives under their command are not disposable props in a partisan narrative. None of this demands absolute perfection, it simply demands absolute seriousness. This hearing proved with agonizing clarity just how violently the current power structure has drifted away from anything resembling seriousness. This dangerous drift did not start on June 12th, and it certainly will not miraculously end with tomorrow's news cycle. However, the unedited footage from that afternoon now stands as a permanent, damning historical record of exactly how far our national standards have plummeted. Americans who genuinely care about the survival and lethality of their military institutions cannot afford to look away from this record. We must absolutely refuse to accept the comforting, cowardly fiction that this was just another overheated partisan squabble. We must not allow the establishment's desperate demand for polite decorum to erase the horrifying substance of what was actually exposed. The substance is both simple and apocalyptic. The individual currently entrusted with the absolute defense of the United States of America proved, under federal oath and on live camera, that he is fundamentally incapable of bearing the crushing weight of his office. That is not a radical partisan attack. It is the only logical, objective conclusion drawn from the exact evidence the hearing itself produced. The only question left is whether this nation possesses the backbone to act on what it has clearly witnessed, or whether we will once again choose the cowardly path of least resistance, blindly hoping the catastrophic consequences remain purely theoretical. They will not remain theoretical for long. Institutions that willfully abandon their internal standards inevitably discover that the unforgiving outside world has been paying close attention. Our adversaries notice, our allies notice, and most tragically, the brave individuals we ask to risk their lives notice most of all. When those warfighters inevitably conclude that their civilian commanders treat their survival as a joke, the institution hollows out from the inside. That hollowing is no longer a future threat, it is currently underway. The Congressional hearing permanently vaporized the last remaining excuses for pretending everything is fine. The ultimate choice now rests entirely with the American public. The cameras have finished their job. The damning record is complete. What we do next will permanently dictate whether the United States military survives as an elite institution worthy of the immense trust it demands from its service members, or whether it continues its tragic, humiliating decay into just another pathetic stage for cheap political performance. If you genuinely believe the United States of America deserves a Department of Defense that isn't run like a trashy television segment, you must speak up. Leave a comment. Forcefully tell others exactly what you witnessed. Subscribe so you are prepared for the battles to come. The cowardly people who profit from your silence are desperately praying you stay quiet. Do not give them the satisfaction.